governor's race brings lesser of two evils voting to a whole new level. The Monica Perez Show starts now. This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB. Normally, Saturdays from 3 to 6, and yes, I'm on today 3 to 6, but it's the only time during football season that I am on my regular time. So we have a lot to pack in. This is an important election season, very important. It's the most challenging that I can think of because I don't like to vote lesser of two evils, and both of these candidates turn me off big time. But there is a third way, the libertarian way. I'm not a knee-jerk libertarian voter. I did not vote for Gary Johnson and William Weld in the presidential election because they're not real libertarians. But I have the real libertarian candidate for Georgia governor on this show so you can hear from himself what he's all about and why he thinks that a vote for him is a good vote. That's going to be at 5 o'clock this afternoon. And at 5:30, we're going to have our favorite election integrity activist, my favorite political activist, bar none, Garland Favorito is going to be here at 5:30. Tell us the best way to vote, to make your vote count, things we should look for on the ballot, and other issues that only he can address with the kind of expertise that we've come to know. So those are what's going on at 5, but in the 5 o'clock hour. But until then, Binkley and I, my producer Binkley here, have so much to unpack for you. Binkley, you have been working hard, have you not?
I've been trying to.
Well, you actually have certainly been putting the hours in, and I'll tell you how I know and how my entire family knows, because if I ever forget to turn off my phone, it'll completely blows up like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'll hear my young son, like in his tiny voice, like down the hall. It's not tiny anymore, but say, Binkley, go to bed. Because
Wait
he
a
knows.
minute.
Yes, he knows it's you.
You can hear those text messages throughout your entire house?
Because I leave my doors open. My older son has Down syndrome, and I have to absolutely keep all the doors wide open so we can all hear in case he escapes.
Well, now I know.
So I try to remember to turn it off, but sometimes I forget, and I'll just like the phone. And also I'll lend my phone to the kids, but whatever. They have those crappy phones that break all the time. So they all know that in the wee hours, Binkley will text like 1,000 times. But lately it's all been like, oh my gosh, and then I found this, and then I found that. So we have, I would say, some explosive stuff from the Abrams backstory that absolutely nobody has found, because it's not like you stumbled upon recent articles. You were digging deep and found stuff that nobody else has found, correct?
Yes, I haven't seen this stuff brought up anywhere else.
Yeah, and lest people think that we're just exposing Abrams, we have done numerous shows on both Abrams and Kemp, and if people had listened to us, the race right now would probably be Cagle beating the pants off of Abrams, but that's not how it came down. But I would like people to be able to go back and listen. We are not going to have the time to rehash the really important highlights that we came up with in the past. So can you tell people how to go back and listen to those shows? There are, I think, a couple on Kemp and a couple on Abrams.
They can go to the Propaganda Report podcast on iTunes, and I will link the episodes on Twitter here in a moment.
Okay, so his handle is at Freedom Act Radio, and after the show, I'll retweet whatever he tweets about that at Monica Perez Show. So we have a lot of that, and I would also say I really get a lot of heat for defending people's right to vote. And I mean that most sincerely, or not to vote, or to vote third party, or to vote write-in. I believe that certainly from a symbolic level, voting is a profound demonstration, or at least assertion, of the right to self-government, to govern yourself. And we have probably put in more work to educate the voter and educate their conscience. And if people actually took what we said and reflected, we'd probably be in a better position right now with this election. But I do get a lot of flack for that. And I don't know, what's your take on that, Binkley? I mean, you played something for me a while ago where some activists were saying we should have a collective vote.
That's Linda Sarsour.
Okay, and I believe in the same clip, she was telling people that they should all vote how she tells them to. They should vote for the incarcerated and the undocumented.
Yes.
Right? So when you start with the lesser of two evils or the collective vote or vote how your leaders tell you to vote blindly, that's what you get. You actually get just pure power. Pure power.
Yeah, she actually said that people need to step in line and do as they're told and vote Democrat.
So that just negates the whole concept of democracy. And as an anarcho-capitalist, I'm not actually a card-carrying member of the Libertarian Party. They're just not really libertarian enough for me. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I believe this concept of self-limiting government is a utopian fantasy. I don't think that you can limit, but I have decided to dedicate my life to defending the Bill of Rights because those are real. Those are our rights, whether they're written down on a piece of paper or not. It's helpful to have them written down on a piece of paper. And if the system has democracy as a method to appoint the people who are supposed to oversee those rights and preserve those rights on our behalf, that would be great. It seems to me that what it actually does is the opposite. You elect people who subvert your rights, who take your place and don't have your interests at heart. That is why I'm not a fan of this lesser of two evils thing, because over time, it has gotten us worse and worse to the point where it's just evil versus evil, and the argument is the other guy's worse. But I do feel like when you start getting to the point, I heard another Democrat say to me that it was outrageous that the Republican leadership didn't better control the voters and the rank and file. And I said, well, that you're obviously expressing, that you don't really believe in democracy. He said, at this point, yeah. And I was like, okay, because it's not going your way. But it was all fun and games when it was ushering in the welfare state. So what's your...
I think it's a choice not to vote, just like it's a choice to vote. People are often pressured, saying it's their civic duty to vote, and you must get out and vote, you must get out and vote, you must get out and vote. And that's fine. But it's also a choice not to, and it doesn't mean that you don't have a voice because you choose not to. That's one of the biggest propaganda lines since the beginning of time is you must vote for the choices that we chose for you.
Yeah, and think of it this way. Did I read 40% of the people of eligible voters don't vote? What if 90% of eligible voters didn't vote? Wouldn't that be a vote?
Yeah, sort of.
That would say we do not accept this false choice that you're giving us. And it would happen overnight. You think it would take forever. This is the thing about the lesser of two evils voting, is that it's the way they boil the frog. It's the way, that they get you to just incrementally lose everything. And I think of an example of that is Ronald Reagan, who I was always a fan of. I cried when he was shot. I was little. But Nixon, a Republican, closed the gold window in 1972, I believe, because that's when Ron Paul decided to enter the arena, hang up his scrubs, and head to Washington. And within one decade, less than a decade, the economy was in a tailspin. The interest rates, the currency was all a mess, predictably. And Reagan was elected in a landslide. And instead of saying, look, obviously we can draw a straight line from the 1972 dot to the dot of total, of near collapse, because Nixon closed the gold window, we need to reestablish real money. But instead, he and Paul Volcker, I think, took the lead on it, fixed it. They instituted some harsh policies that preserved fiat money. And I would ask, was that better? Is it better? And then you have the 2008 crisis and $20 trillion of debt right now. I mean, economic stuff gets nuanced, but just as an analogy, is it better to allow to take the lesser, to take a little win at knowing that in the long run all is lost? So I think that's food for thought. But I will not take any guff for my opinion, which I normally do, because you mostly, but on this show, have delivered so much important information about the true nature of these candidates that I think that the voters who do decide to vote, even the lesser of two evils, will have really learned a lot from what we've put out there. And the stuff that you have today is no exception. We really absolutely have to dig into it. I am open to calls, though, and if people want to tweet questions for Ted Metz, who's going to be on later, or we can accumulate those, you can tweet at us at Monica Perez Show or at Freedom Act Radio. And we'll also get to some calls, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK. And Binkley, let's cue up some of that fantastic smoking gun audio you got. That will help illuminate this governor's race. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez.
Evil does seek to maintain power by suppressing the truth.
On News 95.5 and AM 750, WSB.
This is Monica Perez. We are back, and we are going to talk about the governor's election, of course. What else? We got some tweets at Monica Perez Show. You can tweet at us for anything you want to ask Ted Metz or Garland Favorito. They're going to be my guests in the 5 o'clock hour. Binkley, what do you got tweet-wise?
Dean tweets. Would this one want to go with first? We got a couple here.
We had a few that we saw. Let's do Rock.
Okay, Rock.
I like Dean's. Hang on to it, but do Rock's.
Okay. Rock tweets, unless there's a candidate whom I agree on every issue, in order to vote, I have to make some compromises. For example, I agree with Ted Metz on all but abortion, which I believe is murder and therefore should be illegal. My vote for him would be choosing the lesser of two evils. Okay,
so I love that tweet. I love things that make me think. And here's my thought on that. Is just disagreeing with someone doesn't make them evil. And abortion is a great example for that, because murder is evil. And if you believe abortion is murder, then the person who doesn't agree with you on it has to be evil. But especially with abortion in the libertarian context, I live life. My son has Down syndrome. I never got an amnio for him or any of my kids. I would not make that choice for sure. But libertarians can disagree on a couple of what are called competing rights issues. So immigration, for example, in this society, which has limited and diminished private property rights, immigration at the national level has an impact on your ability to control your own private property. So libertarians don't have to be open borders. And like with abortion, where you draw the line between moral law and civil law could be religious. It could be that you believe conception imparts a soul, and that's why that's the dividing line. And you could draw a different line on where you use force. So how would you force a woman to incubate a child if she'd rather starve herself to death? You'd have to use force. So is it a moral issue? Is it a civil issue? So I'm not saying how to come out on those issues. I'm just saying to come out on different sides of those issues doesn't necessarily mean you're evil. But if you engage in deception and fraud and corruption and subversion and exploitation of different groups for political purposes, deceptively for your own ends, that is what I mean by evil. If they're both bad choices because they're corrupt and fraudulent, you're playing a game. You're trying to game evil versus evil. And I'm not sure we have the wisdom for that. I actually think of the Our Father, which is my favorite prayer, that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and lead us not into temptation and deliver us from evil. Maybe a little faith, but I'm not, don't ask me to go religious. I'm not good at it, but I do try to use it as a touchstone. And I think that it's so interesting, such food for thought. Let's get to Dean's tweet next. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez.
Everything you do is being watched by some all-seeing eye.
On News 95.5 and AM 750, WSB.
Terry Voice on WSB, Saturdays from 3 to 6 when I don't make way for UGA Sports. And it's a good thing I'm on today because we have some stuff. I've got Binkley just digging deep on the governor's race. Binkley, my producer here. How you doing, Binkley?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great, too. Feeling good. Feeling good, Mortimer. We had a tweet. I wanted to hear Dean's tweet. Give me.
Yes, we have a tweet from Dean who tweets, "You would think leaders of either party telling supporters to fall in line and be good lemmings would give them food for thought, but it doesn't."
Yeah, people should listen to our podcast that we do, which you can get on iTunes. It's called Propaganda Report. We can get into more of the longer clips and excerpts of when these guys on the left hold training sessions to get people out, how to basically manipulate people into voting without asking questions. And there was one, my favorite clip, maybe you can find the episode and tweet it later on, was, I think you said it was Linda Sarsour, who's a radical activist, I think is a fair way of portraying her. I don't know her.
That's a fair assessment.
So she says, get the vote out. They're all snapping their fingers in the background saying collective vote, which is not a vote. That's not what the vote is. And then furthermore, she says, vote for the incarcerated, vote for the undocumented, etc. So she's saying to vote for non-citizens, people who don't even have the right to vote or hold office, for people who are in jail. Presumably not everybody is in jail unfairly, I would say the majority of people in jail are criminals. So
she's an architect of chaos. She led a lot of those protests at the Kavanaugh hearings.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And she's a fan, ironically, of Louis Farrakhan, right?
Yes, who believes that Bill Cosby doesn't need drugs to sleep with women. He made that very clear.
Yeah, that was the most basically one of my most uncomfortable moments on the air was last show when we played that line from Louis Farrakhan, which Bill Cosby retweeted in Bill Cosby's defense. And I was pretty shocked to when you drew the connection that Linda Sarsour loves this guy. Ugh.
Yes.
I don't get it. Anyway, that's where ideology fails, and it's just blind power. And you need, what Dean was saying, lemmings, people who just follow blindly. So now, speaking of radical power mongers, what you found on Stacey Abrams' backstory was pretty shocking to me. And we've gone through some of her backstory stuff that she lays out as the foundation for her motives and her goals and her worldview and all that, which has been disputed by people who would know. We've covered this all in past shows. Doesn't even ring true. The narrative doesn't make sense. Her claims of poverty. Her parents have graduate degrees. Her sisters are in really powerful and respected positions.
3 Yale graduates from among the children in that family.
Yeah, so just from my own personal experience, I'm the youngest of 9. My father was a truck driver. My mother was a waitress. She graduated to being a practical nurse, and they were finding their way. Their parents were immigrants, and they were finding their way. And then when and all of this was in the context of extreme morality, my being raised, where my father encouraged me to drop out of high school because public school was a hotbed of socialist indoctrination. And I did it. I did drop out of high school. And then my mother freaked out, so I ended up in community college, and I transferred to Harvard, which alarmed my father, you know? So talk about socialist indoctrination. But while there, so I was a junior at Harvard for the first time at Harvard. I got a scholarship, but not for food or anything. So I was starving just for tuition. I was starving. I had no idea how to make a resume, do an interview. I would sit around listening to people talk about how their parents were swapping jobs for each other. So the one dad had an internship. He'd give it to the other guy's kid, and the other guy's dad would give it to their kid. This was not my world, and it was difficult. Plus, I was outspoken, bold. I was always talking about right and wrong, and you can't do that. And I still barely, obviously, have not really learned my lesson because my kids now go to, so that I think the hierarchy is when you start going to a good high school, that's when you've really got a leg up. And so my kids now are going to fancy schools. And, of course, I'm at, meet the other parents' day, saying what I think, and they're just like, okay, I'm not making it easier for my kids. But my point is just that it's Stacey and her sisters have risen to the highest echelons of power, not digging their way out of poverty. So my experience, I wasn't from a broken home, and I wasn't from poverty. I was just from a place of ethics and a place not of social climbing and all that. Think about the people who really are coming out of poverty, the kids who really are, when they're 8 years old, put on the corners with vials of crack. I don't know if that's still a thing. I don't know what the latest is now, but there's real, you're gone. You have a record by the time you're 13. Like, how can you claw your way out of that? And then on top of that, the culture is to have contempt for the system, kind of like what my father said to me. I don't want you in school because they have socialist indoctrination. This is where I think people like everyone from Malcolm X, Tupac, Bill Cosby, and now Kanye are getting demonized or killed or whatever because they point out the problems with this system, and they're radical, whatever, that they really could cause trouble. But I feel they call attention to these really systemic structural barriers to equality and achievement that I don't even have a taste of that kind of a prejudice thing or an inner city thing. Just simply, I have a taste of what it's like to try to master the system from a position of complete ignorance and powerlessness and no money, right? So it's not like I have the cards stacked against me. I just have no cards. And that was very difficult. And I did not make the most of it. I mean, you might think this is awesome, but I really, if I had to support a family, I'm not sure I would have knocked the cover off the ball in the long run. I did fine, but it was an uphill battle. And I feel like it's like an impossible. So I've lost siblings to drug abuse who never even got as far as I got. And I can see how that's an absolute complete deal breaker. And that's why this Stacey's backstory doesn't really ring true. And some of the stuff you brought me where she likens being in Spelman College with being across the street in the projects. There's no difference now.
Right, and that's important for her campaign because she's running on that she represents those communities.
Yeah, but there's a profound difference, and her past and her future belie that she is not of that world, but she exploits it. And this is what you brought to me. This is a part of her backstory that nobody has talked about that I find absolutely fascinating. How do you want to introduce it?
Let me something you said right there. In Abrams' book, Minority Leader, she says, my new classmates were the daughters of politicians and famous lawyers and corporate leaders. One of my closest friends mentioned in passing that she had the U.S. Surgeon General's home phone number. And then she's turning around and saying that there's no difference in a college student, this is an elite school, and people across the street living in poverty.
Yeah, but when she said that, what she was talking about, if I'm not mistaken, was this was happening in the context of her leading students during what she called protests during Rodney King, but they were physically in the same place as the riots, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem. Like, if you're a little too young to remember this, Binkley, probably, but I remember those riots. Now, I wasn't here, but I was in New York City, and it was terrible. It was really terrible because people in their own communities were the ones who were suffering. It wasn't any guilty parties who were suffering. That was what the terrible tragedy was of those misguided acts of violence. And you've got some stuff that I do ties her to a philosophy that I consider at that time to be quite destructive.
Speaking to what you just said, there was a quote from an AJC article in 1992 that is talking about the aftermath of the riots. And it says, 3 Atlanta University Center students — Atlanta University Center is Spelman, Morehouse, and all those colleges in that same area, all those black universities. It says 3 Atlanta University Center students, Stacey Abrams, Lawrence Jeffries, and Kevin Donaldson, say their lives have been turned upside down since they helped lead AUC protest after the Rodney King verdict. They helped create the Student for African American Empowerment, spelled with a K, African American, a group of about 200 students from the 6 AUC schools formed after a protest by the students over the King verdict turned violent. So she was...
Say that last part again. After
a protest by the students over the King verdict turned violent.
Hold on. What's the phrase before that?
They helped create the Students for African American Empowerment, a group
SAAE.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's spelled African American with 2 Ks.
Yes, instead of Cs.
Got it.
A group of about 200 students from the 6 AUC schools formed after a protest by the students over the King verdict turned violent. Now, Abrams claims that she led a peaceful protest while all the chaos was going on, but even if a protest that you lead starts peacefully, you have no control over a herd with herd mentality. And based on all the reporting on this in 1992, she truly did lead a protest. It's hard to believe that protest wasn't involved in the cars getting set on fire, on stores being rampaged, on the chaos that went on.
Yeah, and private property being trampled. But you know what? I would even peel that onion a little bit more and say the Rodney King thing was, I believe the focus was wrong. Rodney King was a troubled guy. He was running from the police because he didn't want to get stopped with drugs or alcohol in his system because he was on probation or something, parole maybe, from some kind of theft conviction, I believe, if I recall correctly. And when they stopped him, they were mad at him. He was trying to kind of get away, and they absolutely, as my father would say, beat his cruller off. They absolutely. And what would have been good is to look at that and say, this is what we allow our cops to do. This is how they react. Is this right or wrong? But by turning it to race, which is exactly what happened when the militarization of the police became a nationwide rallying cry, Eric Holder directed it towards Trayvon Martin and Zimmerman and made it a race thing, or maybe it was the black versus blue thing that came out of Ferguson, but that was all a diversion from a real question that we can all get behind. Is this how we want our relationship with the cops to be? When you put race into it, it gets the people fighting, and you're not going to get a resolution. It actually makes the cops stronger and minorities more oppressed. And I think her issue with the Georgia flag speaks to that kind of cross purposes. Let's get to that after the break. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez.
And now for something completely different.
On News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
I'm your libertarian voice on WSB. We were just talking about Stacey Abrams leading protests during after the Rodney King verdict. I personally think that it's very, very important to hold police accountable. Power corrupts. We must, as a favor to them, lead us not into temptation. We must have transparency, clear laws, and total accountability. So when people divert opportunities to address this stuff, like after the Rodney King beating, and make it a divide the population over it, have people, those Rodney King riots were hurt citizens. They had nothing, especially in Atlanta, they had absolutely nothing to do with the LA police force. It was counterproductive. And Binkley, so you had something to say about that, and then Abrams also had was active in trying to get the Georgia flag changed, and I think that also was perceived as counterproductive. Tell me about that.
Yeah, at that point in time, Atlanta had its first black mayor. There was a black police chief. There was a Democrat governor in office. There was a lot of progress, and there was already a lot of talk about changing the flag because it had a Confederate logo on it. And the riots really brought division back to the table and, essentially gave these students some power in the activism community and the process. But these riots didn't help anybody. The people in the communities, even though they acted like the students were taught, the students acted like they were speaking for the people in the communities. The people in the communities were mad at those students because they destroyed their property.
Oh, yeah, I read some of those articles you sent me. And I remember that from L.A., too. I mean, the riots were directed at the poor neighborhoods. It was not cool. We are not going to have time to play the clip I wanted you to play of describing how Stacey approached the other issue, which was shortly thereafter of changing the flag. That clip really speaks for itself. Let's get into it after the break. 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK, or you can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to be. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB. Saturdays from 3 to 6 is my normal schedule, but UGA Sports a lot of times moves me around. So if you can't find me on the air on Saturday afternoons, then you can go to iTunes and find our Propaganda Report podcast, which includes what I do with my producer Binkley, who's right here helping me on this show, and also we do podcasts together, and he also posts this show commercial-free on there. And we are, I rarely have guests, as you know, and every time I have one, I tell you that. I try to make an exception for local libertarians and also my favorite local libertarian activists. So at 5 o'clock, we're going to have Ted Metz, who is the third party on the ballot. He's running for Georgia governor. And he's open to questions. You can tweet at us at Monica Perez Show. He's going to tell you what he stands for and why he thinks you should vote for him. And Garland Favorito is an election integrity activist here in Georgia, but he really knows pretty much everything you need to know about the ballot and so much more. So he's going to be on at 5:30. But right now, there is so much to pack in as Binkley has really done his homework on Stacey Abrams, and we've done shows on Abrams before, on Brian Kemp before. All of that can be found on iTunes, Propaganda Report, or tweet at us if you want help finding it. At Freedom X Radio is his Twitter, and mine is at Monica Perez Show. But where we left it before the break was talking about Stacey Abrams' radical backstory that she does not talk about.
No, she certainly does not.
It's possible that she would benefit from it because she does, there is a polarization on left and right that's happening right now. Radical is not a dirty word anymore, it seems like to me. But yet she doesn't bring it up. I don't know why, but let's first lay this out and then kind of talk about what it means. I don't think it means what it looks like it means on its face. I want to talk about what it means. First, let's lay it out. How do you want to do it?
Well, let's play clip one when she was on CNN with Jake Tapper recently to show how she responded to. She was asked if she agrees with Michelle Obama and that when they go low, you go high, you take the high road, or if she agrees with Eric Holder, who said when they go low, you kick them.
So this is her recently on national television kind of positioning herself, framing herself, right? This is her opportunity to paint who she is. And it was in response to the question, do you do what Michelle Obama recommends, go high when they go low, or Holder, go kick them when they're low, when they're down. Let's hear what she has to say about herself now.
It's loading.
Really, Binkley? This isn't a podcast, man. This is
difficult. And that's why if you look at my campaign, hyperbole in elections can be very difficult. And that's why if you look at my campaign, I've run a very consistent campaign from beginning to end. I didn't blow things up. I didn't point weapons at people. I didn't threaten to round people up in my truck.
Okay, can I just say, this is why I was like, look.
My daughter Stacey.
What? Sorry, can I slip something in? Binkley?
Yes, that was an accident.
Okay, so this is what I thought was so goofy about the Brian Kemp's ads. It's like a setup to make, I actually wonder, one of the shows we did talked about the very, very sketchy behavior that Garland Favorito and others did try to get an investigation going on what happened after the 2016 election. The servers got hacked and there was no backup. So the FBI was looking into Georgia servers. Brian Kemp's the Secretary of State. And when they gave the servers back, instead of backing them up, I believe he wiped them clean so you could not see if whether there was election integrity or not. That's bad. And we talked about so I wonder sometimes if he might have been in trouble for that, and maybe he's a lose-on-purpose candidate. I really don't know. I mean, I have no idea. I'm not making that accusation. But I always think when someone comes off as a little crazy, like Jeb Bush made some crazy ads. These boots are made for walking. You remember that one against Marco Rubio? Just weird stuff that made it look like he was trying to lose on purpose. I always wonder about that. I've been wrong about that in the past, so I'm not falling on my sword for that. I only fall on my sword for the Bill of Rights. But this, so he does some goofy things. She's calling him out on it. She's saying, "Look, he's the nut job. I'm the stable one. I'm the one you can count on. This guy is clearly radical."
She takes the high road, is what it sounded like.
Yes. Thank you for closing that circle. So, but the next clip you have is also recent, right?
This one is from, I believe, the end of last year.
Okay, and it's her mother who's a preacher.
It's her mother preaching a sermon.
What are her credentials, the mother?
Her mom has 2 graduate degrees, one in library science and one in seminary from Emory, and I can't remember what her undergrad degree
Emory,
is.
That's good stuff. So let's hear what she has to say about her daughter, right?
Yes, this is a very revealing clip.
My daughter, Stacey Abrams, and Stacey went to school here in Gulfport until we left going to seminary. And she just stepped down from being the House of Representatives top Democrat, the minority leader in Georgia, and now she's a candidate for governor of Georgia. And you might have seen her, but on TV, and she gets in trouble too, just like Sonia does. She's trying to get them to take down those statues of Stone Mountain, those racist things, and the flag. But then when she was at Spelman College, she went on the steps of the Capitol and burned the Georgia flag. I don't know if they know about that or not.
They do now.
They do now. Very good, Binkley. They do now. Thank you, Binkley. And you didn't stumble upon that in the AJC or something, right?
No, I found it on some obscure website.
But how? This is what I find interesting. That's why I know that you're the only one who has it.
I can't reveal my secrets.
Oh, okay. Sorry. But it wasn't like you heard somebody talking about it.
No, I was searching. I was looking for stuff because I had a feeling that
you were scouring.
Yeah, her mom's sermons were probably a little more radical than
all potentially relevant audio you were scouring. So here's the thing. So it sounds like she is an extreme radical, burning the flag, the Georgia flag. So the candidate for governor of Georgia is burning the Georgia flag on the steps of the Capitol when she's in college.
Yeah, and nobody's talked about that, which is really curious.
But this is the one who led the only peaceful protest while the whole world was rioting around her in the actual neighborhood.
Yeah.
She was leading these under the peaceful thing for Rodney King.
Yeah, she was leading what she says was a peaceful thing, although you read all the articles, the protests coming from the schools ended up breaking out into violence. That doesn't mean that she did it, but for her to have led a peaceful protest through all the chaos, she would have been able to do something that neither the governor, the mayor, or the police captain was able to do.
And they were black, so they might have been able to,
right?
Wouldn't they? Because this was a racial issue.
Yes.
So it's not like she came and saved the day as this powerful black woman. It's that even other community leaders, everybody, were powerless to stop the violence.
Well, what she did is she led one of these. She ended up being basically the face of representing the students, just like her and those two other kids.
Yeah, I want to get to where this led, though, because it sounds like she's just radical, but I think when she was selected for it's such an elite program, I never even heard of it, this Telluride thing, until I was investigating her, and I talked about it on a previous show. So she went to this Telluride program in high school, and I think they really taught her how to plan her career, which she talks about. Since she was 19, she has plotted the path that she is still walking on 25 years later. And I think this was also kind of calculated and led to personal gain for her.
The Telluride program has a 4.7% acceptance rate.
And that's of the people who apply to it.
Yeah.
I never even heard of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it is known to give a bigger advantage than any other program in the country. If you have this on your resume, according to college, what is it? It's a website that evaluates other college.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't remember what it is. But they say that if you have that on your resume, you get in anywhere. And Abrams actually turned down a scholarship from Harvard and Yale going into and choosing to go to Spelman instead. How many people in those communities she says that she's just like are able to say, I turned down scholarships to both Yale and Harvard?
There are two clips I want you to play before, in the next couple of segments. One is the one where she says there was no difference between us girls in Spelman and the girls in the projects across the street from Spelman, which is definitely not true. And then the other one where she talks about how empowering it was for her to get this tremendously powerful appointment at the age of 19 in the mayor's office in Atlanta, which, if you go back, which you did, to the contemporary articles at the time, didn't she say something to the effect of, you don't want to risk another riot, so do what I want? Yes,
and she was using that organization that she started with those other students as a weapon.
SAAE?
Yes, the SAAE. She was using that as a weapon, and by mobilizing this group of people, very Vladimir Lenin, Saul Alinsky style, she got a lot of advantages that other students did not because she was the face of it. She got a Ford Foundation thing. She ended up working on a campaign. Like you said, she worked for the governor shortly thereafter, who the students at that time saw the governor as the enemy, and she went and worked for him.
We got to take a break. Calm down. I got them all riled up. But we're gonna unfold this stuff in her own words, if I understand correctly. So stay tuned. More to come. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez.
It's like everything I've been brought up to believe was all made of bull.
On News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
That has to be my favorite clip. So Binkley, we have like 3 minutes. This is my producer, Binkley.
Yes.
This is Monica. We have 3 minutes. Do you want to replay that shocking clip by Stacey Abrams' mother as an entree into the long segment where we can play the two other clips that I think
Let's do it. Let's play it again.
Yeah, bring it, close the circle. So let's play this again, and then at the bottom of the hour we'll peel the onion one more layer. Go.
My daughter, Stacey Abrams, and Stacey went to school here in Gulfport until we left going to seminary. And she just stepped down from being the House of Representatives top Democrat, the minority leader in Georgia, and now she's a candidate for governor of Georgia. And you might have seen her, but on TV, and she gets in trouble too, just like Sonia does. She's trying to get them to take down those statues of Stone Mountain, those racist things, and the flag. But then when she was at Spelman College, she went on the steps of the Capitol and burned the Georgia flag. I don't know if they know about that or not.
As Binkley said, they do now. Do we know who Sonia is?
I do. I have to look it up. It's somebody who is also, I believe, a minority leader in another state.
Well, here's, because I'm looking at Stacey Abrams' sisters. I thought maybe it was one of her sisters. Leslie, Janine, and Andrea?
Yes, that's correct.
And, I mean, these people, their resumes are amazing. And I'm sure if you dig deeper, you see just what you see with Stacey, just a whole litany of her own personal march through the institutions. Leslie is the first African-American female federal judge in Georgia. She was Obama appointed. She went to Brown and Yale Law School, which is so hard to get into. Mm-hmm. Janine is an evolutionary biologist at the CDC. She went to Duke. She's a PhD, etc. And Andrea is a professor of cultural anthropology, and her resume is very deep, too. Taught at Emory, PhD from Emory. So there was a clip we probably won't get to that says about her experience with poverty is what shaped her worldview. It's hard to believe.
It is.
So anyway, let's dig into a little bit more of her worldview. After the break, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB Talk. You can tweet at me, at Monica Perez Show. You can tweet at Binkley, at Freedom Act Radio.
Monica Perez.
Maybe it's something really cool that I don't even know about, you know.
On News 95.5 and AM 750, WSB.
I am your libertarian voice on WSB. Saturdays from 3 to 6 when UGA Sports does not move me around. You can listen to my podcasts on iTunes under Propaganda Report or Monica Perez Show. And we've got some explosive stuff about Stacey Abrams that has just come to light. We've been talking about that, but I want to take a couple of calls first. I am going to Ed and Gwinnett. Hi, Ed. Can you hear me? You're on with Monica.
Okay, let me get this straight. You guys are criticizing Stacey Abrams for burning a racist flag and for trying to wipe out racist monuments off Stone Mountain.
No.
But you're not saying anything about Kemp and his record trying to prevent people from voting?
No, I'm not criticizing. I'm not criticizing her for.
That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I'm not. No, I'm criticizing her for her cynical exploitation of people and their emotions to gain power over a very long period plan. Now, for Kemp, I think that the voter suppression thing is the least of the things he did. I did 2 shows, one during the primary and one before the runoff, talking about how I think what Kemp did during his stint as Secretary of State, which he's still, during the election was rose to the level of criminality. And I can tell you how to listen to that. Binkley, what episodes are those?
I just tweeted it out, episode 98. And I'm still looking for the other one.
All right, so it was in May and July.
The second half of that episode.
This is truly a battle between 2 evils, in my opinion. And I'm not sure which is lesser. But this stuff with Stacey Abrams is deeper, and it goes back further. And there's more to it, and this new stuff has come to light. With Kemp, he seems just run-of-the-mill. We've seen what he's done. I had on my show, and he's going to be on today. I have on my show the guy who tried to get him investigated for that. Garland's going to be on at 5:30, and he takes your side on the voter registration.
Well, what I'm asking you is burning a racist flag. Do you find that offensive?
No, I'm not offended by people burning flags.
Offensive?
I do not find burning flags offensive. I think flags are a symbol of state power, and I don't prefer it. But I'm just saying that, why doesn't she talk about that, and what did it mean? Was she doing it out of sincere, and actually it was counter to the cause? Binkley, what do you have to say?
At that time, there was a lot of, the governor, the mayor, they were working with civil rights groups to get that done, to get the flag changed, and the governor caught wind that they were going to do a demonstration and burn the flag, and he urged them not to because he felt it was going to hurt their progress.
And they did change the flag. It got done.
Well, apparently it worked. We don't have the racist flag in Georgia anymore.
I don't think her efforts worked. I think that it was already working, right?
Their efforts were viewed as a stunt by most people, and that's why people were urging them not to, because they were trying to continue making progress instead of being divisive about it.
I have to cycle through this real quick because I've got a guest on at 5, and we have a couple more clips to play, and I've got a couple more calls. So I'm going to Sheila in Atlanta. What do you got?
Yes, hi, Monica. Listen, okay, I have a couple things to say to you. First of all, as an African-American female, I take offense to you saying that these people, we take that as being inhumane, okay?
I don't refer to people as a collective in race.
You said these people.
I was probably talking about her and the 2 people she was working with.
Oh, I thought you were talking about it as a group of people.
No.
And second of all, okay, so let's just say she did go to predominantly good schools, quote, good schools, or she had a better life than people in the projects or whatever. Does that make her less qualified? I mean, so she's trying to fight for equality?
No, I'm saying...
Wait, let me finish.
Oh, God.
Is she trying to fight? Is her fighting for equality, justice for all people who are less fortunate? So who cares what school?
I don't think that's what she's doing. I don't think that's what she's doing.
You don't think that she's fighting for everyone and equality?
No, I don't think she's fighting for anyone. I think that she's on a political path and she's doing this stuff.
So you think she just want to add this to her resume? That's what you think?
I think she's a politician, and I think she does what politicians do,
well,
and I think that's what she's doing.
They're all politicians.
I know. That's why I don't like them.
Let me say this. And then you talked about the Rodney King, the riots after that and everything. Well, you know what? You got a president on here, talking about mocking people and everything. I mean, really? And I really would like to
with
know.
the Rodney King thing, I think that with that and with the militarization of the police and all this stuff is that we would get a lot more done to restrain abuse of power if we got together and we saw that we are all in danger. They have the power and we can join together and get it done. Instead, we spend our time having conflict with each other, and it distracts us, and that just increases the power at the top.
I totally agree with you on that. We do want to all come together because we live together, we work together, we eat in the restaurants together.
And we're subject to the same...
And now we're using the same bathrooms. But you got an administration who's totally dividing this country, has added more chaos and division.
But that has nothing to do with this. That's not my administration. I'm a libertarian. I have nothing to do with that. All I say is that we need to pay attention to who really has the power and who is going to be a victim of that power. And it's all of us. And I think it's politically cynical to divide us because that increases the power at the top, and we all suffer for it.
And do you honestly think that Stacey is trying to divide this country and this state? Do you honestly think that?
Yes, and I think
I think you're wrong if you think that.
Okay, let me play some clips. Binkley, sorry, I didn't mean to hang up here. Binkley, I do want to play some clips. Maybe we should play the clip of her mother. I'm not trying to fuel the fire. I actually do not like to take the bait of this kind of thing because I'm not talking about that.
Yeah, it's about power.
It's about power, and what I'm trying to bring out here is that what Sheila said. She is what Stacey and a lot of the people going for power now want you to believe, but it's not. She is in that upper echelon of the powerful. She isn't, and she always has been, or as since high school, and that's who she's working for. She's a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. She's been through all these foundations. She is part of that community, and I think that she will serve it with the more power she has. Go ahead.
I agree. When we study these Saul Alinsky, these kind of radical tactics, Saul Alinsky is a community organizer like Barack Obama was, and she's putting them on display. Can I give an example that I think can help? I think it helped the commentary. In 2005, Stacey Abrams drafted an anti-panhandling bill that homeless advocates decried as being anti-black and as criminalizing poverty. Yet today, she's running on part of her platform saying she's going to decriminalize poverty when she did the opposite in a bill she drafted 13 years ago.
Yeah, and my point is that these things are politically expedient.
Yeah.
That's what politicians do. And so when you think that what you're doing, and we fall for this over and over and over again, including with Trump, you fall for it. You fall for, I'm for you. Let me tell you why. I'm the most outsider you could ever imagine because I curse. Or, I mean, it's just everybody's always... Trump is an insider. Obama was an insider. Stacey Abrams is an insider. They're not representatives of us who have sacrificed everything to help us. And and they can be counted on even in the face of the temptations of power. They pursue power. They're about power. And they're saying things that make you react that way because you are going to give them power.
And one of the main criticisms that Democrats had of her, and a reason a lot of them didn't support her and supported Stacey Evans, is because they believed that she was too focused on her own career path to the presidency.
Wow. Well, she did have that Freudian slip where she said my road to the White House, and she said, oops, governor's mansion. Don't want to get ahead of myself.
Yeah. And
so, I'm not trying to make fun of her. I really am not. And I don't like it that I'm the one who has to bring all this stuff out. But it's not anywhere, right? So we could bring everything out about everyone. That is the purpose of the free press, and you're not hearing it. That's what is making me so mad about the Jamal Khashoggi case. That guy's family is so deep state. Adnan Khashoggi was the arms dealer in the Iran-Contra scandal. Why is nobody talking about that? His cousin was Dodi Fayed at the highest levels of power in the world. Why does your free press not talk about that stuff? They barely say the guy's name now in case somebody figures it out. I'm just saying that I don't like it that we are the ones who are responsible for bringing all this stuff out because sometimes it swings left, sometimes it swings right. When we came out against Kemp in the primaries and even in the runoff, we got calls immediately. You're just doing this to scuttle him. No, we're doing it because that's information that just was not getting the press. I had other conservative members of the media criticizing me for bringing this stuff out. I mean, you can't win for losing.
Racial division has been a social issue that has been used since the rise of civilization to divide and conquer.
See, here's the thing. When you played those clips for me of Kanye, and everybody on the left was saying he's nuts, he should lose his job, he should be committed, people should do an intervention. When you actually listen to what he said, it was not the rhetoric of divisiveness. And you look at some people who and I feel like that Trump, if you really wanted to get cynical and think that it's all a scam, Trump might have brought him into the fold to taint him. Because what did they do with Bill Cosby? He's not in jail for what they accuse him of, even if he committed that. He's in jail for what he said, for his politics. Tupac, some people think he was murdered because he was trying to change the gang culture. Malcolm X, when he had enlightenment, 2 members of Farrakhan's organization were convicted for his killing. You have to think about where people are really coming from, what their real purposes are, and if your press is really telling you everything. So I'm just trying. I brought out everything I knew about Kemp, and Abrams. I'll keep doing it. But, it's a burden. I don't like it because I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. And It's not like everyone's like, well, she's not a Democrat. Let's give her a pass. It's like, no. Then you get both sides piling on. Anyway, so, we'll have to play. Do you want to pick a clip? Do you want to pick one of those clips? Or you want to take a break and regroup? We got a little derailed there. We had a long segment that we were going to bring out a couple more things, but I don't want to rush it. So let's take a quick break if it's not too early. And when we come back, we will give you a little more or maybe wrap it up. And then at 5 o'clock, we have all positivity. So this has been some negativity, obviously. That's what digging deep into this stuff is always going to bring out when you're talking about a race of the lesser of two evils. But at the 5 o'clock hour, we're going to have the Libertarian candidate for governor, Ted Metz. And then at 5:30, we're going to have our favorite election integrity activist, Garland Favorito, on. So let's take a quick break and wrap up this portion of the show after the break. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez.
This will not stand, This aggression will not stand, man.
On News 95.5 and AM 750, WSB.
Wrapping it up before we talk to Libertarian gubernatorial candidate Ted Metz at the top of the hour. Just had a very lively discussion with some callers who were a little taken aback by how hard we were hitting Stacey Abrams. But this stuff is new and nobody's talking about it, and the burden is on our shoulders. I did not mean to cut anybody short, but we did. But one of the arguments that Sheila made is that Stacey's working for the people. And my argument, my gut instinct, my conclusion is that she's working for herself, and she always has been. She got accepted to an incredibly elite program as a high school student, and I think they really taught those the people who were in those programs how to set the path of their lives and achieve those goals. And I think so she was prepared since a teenager. And that's when she was doing this stuff with the Rodney King riots and burning the flag on the Capitol steps. And she benefited from that immediately. So, Binkley, tell us how, or did you have a clip for it? I know you have a clip for it, but what do you got?
She got a job shortly thereafter in the mayor's office. She got some sort of Ford Foundation grant where she ended up touring the country over the summer. And, on top of that, she also ended up working for a campaign. I can't remember whose campaign it was. It was a Democrat in, I think, the 11th district. But while she was touring the country, these people in the community who she claimed to be standing for during these protests are still complaining about the students who trashed their yards, who intimidated their store owners, who looted their stores. And these people in this group, whoever was in this group, they were saying that they represent these community members. The community members are telling an entirely different story. They're intimidated and afraid.
How long is clip 8?
I don't think it's very long.
All right, let's play clip 8 about how this is the job she got immediately after she led those protests. And there was an article from back then saying, if you don't want more protests, let's hear clip 8.
Creating commissions where people are imbued with power. One of the reasons my experience at 19 led me to this opportunity is that someone hired me at the age of 19 to run a major program for the city of Atlanta. Having the ability to think through policy, to engage, to have the power of the city behind me when I would call someone and say, I need you to come to this meeting, and they hear my younger, although my voice has always sounded kind of old, but they would hear me. They showed up because I was able to say, I'm calling on behalf of the city of Atlanta.
So that was the position she got in the immediate aftermath of those, of her agitation. I absolutely have to cut for this break, and stay tuned because we're going to get nothing but positivity in the next hour with our guest Ted Metz and then Garland Favorito. This is Monica Perez.
Please take my hand. Now open your mind to me. Please open your mind. Open your mind. Open your mind.
This is Monica Perez, your libertarian voice on News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB. Saturdays from 3 to 6 when I can get it. Today is one of those days, the only day during football season that I have a full show, and I could not possibly let this opportunity go by during this important election season without having as my guest the Libertarian candidate for Georgia governor, a guy who I've known for years, ever since Ron Paul campaigning days, the Libertarian candidate Ted Metz. Ted, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I want you to make the absolute most of your time. So let's hit the ground running. I want to know, I think the best way to start for people who maybe don't know, give us the kind of basic libertarian position, specifically your basic position, either as your general philosophy or specifically as the gubernatorial candidate.
Well, I will just broadly address what it's all about to be a libertarian. And the easiest way to explain it is the same thing that you learned in kindergarten, is leave me alone, don't tell me what to do, and don't steal my stuff. And beyond that, we believe firmly that everything about life in general, whether it's either the government or your personal interactions, everything should be voluntary and consensual.
Yes, I have to say, Murray Rothbard, I liked his, the only law is don't touch me or my stuff. And Harry Brown, he said, don't ever define libertarians in the terms that conservatives or liberals use. We are not social liberals and fiscal conservatives. We believe in individual liberty and personal responsibility on all issues at all times. Do you think those are fair statements?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, great.
And yes, those are not only fair, but they're also accurate statements.
Yes, I totally agree. Yes. So, okay. So what, and how would you kind of bring that to the governor's race in your campaigning, and if you were to win?
Well, that's a hard question to answer in less than 3 hours. So let me start with saying basically the reason I'm running is to end corruption, to help government, to help the people hold government accountable, and to lower taxes. Now, getting back to the voluntary consensual thing, a lot of things the government does are not voluntary and are not consensual. Government has run amok lately with it's rife with corruption, and the corruption costs our tax dollars to be spent by somebody else. I think Truman said it best, that nobody gets rich in politics without being a crook.
Yes, I think that that your point about ending corruption is very interesting, and it's absolutely it's the right answer. Because if you look at the Constitution, it seems to me that if you actually stuck to it and there were no corruption and the elected officials actually defended the Constitution as they're supposed to, we would live in a libertarian society. That's what it was founded on. So that's all it takes. You don't have to pass new laws. You just have to
you just have to enforce the ones that are already on the books.
Yes, and pare back
such as the constitutional restriction on passing grants of special privilege. And we see that all the time. And that's how politicians' friends and the politicians themselves, enrich themselves at the taxpayer teat.
Can you explain that? Expound on that?
Grant of special privilege, in particular, is some sort of a legislation they pass to give someone favorable treatment over someone else, either in tax relief or special privileges, or like a slide on an EPA regulation or something like that.
It's quite often used in the context of taxes. And the way I look at it is they put this huge blanket over everybody, completely stifling, restrictive blanket, and they cut air holes out for the people they like. And it's kind of like Uber. If there weren't so many laws against taxi freedom, there never would have been an opportunity for Uber to kind of blanket the earth. They used those little holes in the fabric of politics, because they happen to be more powerful, to take over a niche that was created by the restrictions that these privileges, that the government uses.
Right, and it expands beyond taxation. It's also in regulations and regulatory and compliance issues as well.
Which is why the progressive era was started by the robber barons and not the other way around. And yet it continues. And that's really, I think, where the left has picked up on the way things work. And they've picked up the progressivism in getting government in a position to enrich themselves and their friends. Yes, and one thing that I think is absolutely crazy is that with all the mania against Trump on the national level, people don't turn to the 10th Amendment and see the wisdom of it. That if we returned the power to the state, then you would have power at the state level, and we could really make a difference. But I also want to point out one thing, is that this idea of voting for the lesser of two evils. I got a tweet earlier, which was interesting and thought-provoking, saying, well, if this person didn't agree with you on everything, then again, it's a choice among evils. And I would say it's not. The corruption is the evil. The bastardization, the exploitation of the laws, those are evil practices practiced by most of the elected officials in the major parties. That it's actually, even if it's not perfect and everybody's interests aren't 100% aligned, eliminating the corruption, being honest, and following your principles is not evil, even if people don't agree with all the positions that you come out on.
Well, and again, if you hold it down to the most basic concept of things that are consensual and voluntary, then you've eliminated a lot of the opportunities for corruption.
Right, all of them. I mean, right? You can't. It's coercion, fraud, theft that leads to all of it. So, what do you say to people who? I got a tweet from someone also named Monica saying the libertarians. The libertarian vote will dilute the Republican vote. Please don't do it. This is what she said. She's a follower of mine. What do you think of that?
I was giving a presentation at some town hall meeting, and basically I said it seems to me that the math adds up that a libertarian vote counts for 3 votes, because it's a vote for the libertarian, it's a vote for the other parties, it's a vote for Democrats, it's a vote for Republican. The thing is, I'm actually 40% of voters nationwide identify themselves as independents. Around 30% of people identify as Democrats or Republicans. That means the majority of voters are really disenfranchised because they don't have a third voice in government, a voice of reason, a voice of logic, a voice of like economic prosperity. We have just 2 parties basically that rule and control the whole thing. The problem with government is it's only made up of Republicans and Democrats. And when it comes down to it, every vote that raises our taxes, increases government, increases the size and scope of government as well as regulations, it's always voted on by Republicans and Democrats because that's all that's in government. So if we want to do something different, we have to get a different voice into government.
That's very interesting, though, that math that you use, because you could, by that argument, you could get the most votes if you reinvigorated the people who have given up on voting. You could get more votes than any Democrat or Republican without stealing a single one of their votes.
Oh, right? And they know that very well. That's why you've not seen me in any of the media. You haven't seen me on TV. You haven't seen me in the newspapers, or very, very few and far between articles that there is actually a third gubernatorial candidate.
Are you going to be in the debates?
Because they don't want to upset their gravy train of the same old system where the same 2 groups of people are in power. And if you look at it, the corporations behind government essentially give equally to both parties because they always have a winner in the race.
Well, that point is well made when you think of how well Ron Paul did in the Iowa caucus that year and was completely buried by the media. And then you look at somebody like Trump, who supposedly spent nothing on his campaign, and because of all the media coverage, he catapulted to the prominent position. And whatever. I don't want to derail us on our precious time. Are you not you are in the upcoming debates, are you not?
I will be on Tuesday night with the GBTV Laudermilk Young series. And then again, I will be on November the 4th right here on WSB TV radio.
So I'm going to keep you on through the break to the next segment, but could you tell people now, they maybe write it down and then we'll tell them again after the break, how people can learn more about you and double check on those dates and just kind of keep up with you? Is it Facebook, Twitter, your website?
It's so simple. It's TEDMETZ. You can put that in Google. It's tedmetz.com. I'm Ted Metz on Facebook and almost all the social media. I'm easy to find.
That's fantastic. So let's take a quick break, and then we're going to get back to, you can pick your favorite issue, or you can tell people what you think is the most important issue locally. Whatever you want to do with those last couple of minutes, we're going to open it up. Maybe we'll open it up to a call, 404-872-0750, 1-800-WSB-TALK, or folks can tweet at me at Monica Perez Show. Be right back with more Ted Metz.
Monica Perez.
You maniac! You blow it up!
On News 95.5 and AM 750, WSB.
We are back. I want to waste no time talking to the Libertarian candidate for governor, Ted Metz. Ted, you with me still?
I am with you, and I want to just jump right in here with my call out to Governor Deal to issue an immediate executive order to enable farmers to plant industrial hemp in the wake of the devastation of Hurricane Michael. We need to do this immediately because to preserve the soil, to save the soil, and maybe even give the farmers a cash crop at the end of the year.
You know,
and I've already talked to my friends in Kentucky. They're sitting on tons of seeds. They're willing to work with us.
And what do
with
they
our
do with
Secretary of Agriculture being Sonny Perdue, it could be done in no time.
And what do they do with it once it's harvested?
Well, right here in Georgia, the carpet. We have the world's leading carpet industry. They use it for carpet backing. It's called jute, and right now we have to import
jute
that from
is
China
hemp?
and Canada.
I did not
So
know that.
there's
jute
a
is
fix.
hemp. I did not know that.
The whole thing about our agricultural economy is that we could make billions out of all the different things that industrial hemp can do, from chemicals to cosmetics to fuel to fiber to, just a myriad of things. And
that reminds me that I have. Let me give you a call if this guy can. Oh, shoot! I just cut Ted off. Ted, you got to call back immediately. Dang, how did that happen? All right, let me get this call, and let's see if Ted can get back on the line in time. Drake and Canton, what do you got?
I had a question thank you for taking my call, first off, but I wanted to ask candidate Metz what his ideals are as far as it relates to the governor and immigration reform.
Okay, I thought that would be a good question in the context of the agricultural stuff. So, Ted, are you there? Did I get you back, Ted? Sorry, Ted. So I just got that call from Drake. He wanted to know about immigration reform, and I thought it was a good question in the context of agriculture in Georgia. Can you give me, like, in 1 minute, your views on immigration in the context of your run and the governorship?
If you're white or if you're black in America, it's as a result of immigration. The Latinos were basically here before white men settled. So I don't see what the big issue is other than it's creating a stir because of some reason that, Republicans are afraid that immigrants are going to vote Democrat or something. And the Democrats are pushing the issue because they think that the immigrants are going to vote Democrat, but the immigrants are going to vote conservative. So I don't see really what the big deal is. We need more people to feed the Ponzi scheme that is Social Security and Medicare. So my attitude is let them come in, let them sign the guest registry, let's get their fingerprints, let's find out where they're going to be, and let them stay here as long as they're peaceful, voluntary, and consensual.
Well, I would say that you can recognize a human being's right to work and travel separate from a foreigner's right to vote in your country. I mean, that's a political thing, but to prevent somebody from, this person who owns a farm from giving a job to somebody who wants to work on that farm and even live on that farm.
All men are created equal. All men are created equal. People need to think about that. All men are created equal. Doesn't matter where you live or where you're from. It's these
artificial barriers. If we had perfect private property rights, national immigration policy wouldn't be important to us because we could control our own private property. So I think it's that issue gets libertarians can take different sides on how they want to adapt that issue to the actual reality we live in. But we gotta break, Ted. So I'm gonna thank you so much for coming on. I'm gonna say goodbye. Say goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for vote for me. It's going to be a runoff anyway. Send a message. Vote for me.
Good point. Vote for him. It's going to be a runoff anyway. And just Google Ted Metz, tedmetz.com. Find him on Twitter, Facebook, everything like that. We're going to talk to Garland after the break. Thanks a million, Ted. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez.
Well, no one's going to top that.
On News 95.5 and AM 750 WSB.
I am your libertarian voice on WSB, and I just want to let you know that you should use the WSB radio app to register to win tickets to see the Beach Boys, led by Mike Love and Bruce Johnston, live at the Cobb Energy Center. It's a prize pack that includes 2 premium seats for the January 20th show and a $50 gift card to Davio's Northern Italian Steakhouse. Tickets for the Beach Boys are also on sale now at Ticketmaster.com, but you got to go to WSB radio app to register to win the tickets. I'm not giving them away on the air, although I love to give stuff away on the air. That's it for today. And but we are about to have the continue the exciting and lively show that we that has marked today. We just got off the phone with Ted Metz, the Libertarian candidate for governor. If you missed it, go. We will tweet out the podcast of that probably Tuesday or Wednesday. At Freedom Act Radio is my producer Binkley's Twitter, and mine is at Monica Perez Show. You should find it there. And right now we have my favorite local activist, Garland Favorito. Garland, can you hear me?
I can, Monica. Thank you so much for having me back on the show. What a great show today.
Yeah, lively.
I got two kudos. I know you want to talk about elections, but I got to give you two kudos first. And one is I wanted to thank you for showing us that there's an alternative in the governor's race, somebody who's free of ethics issues and free of special interest, and people can actually vote for this and stop all this divisive politics between the Democrats and the Republicans. So I really appreciate the fact that you're willing to do this, because both of these candidates are loaded up with 10 or 12 different ethics issues that have been documented by not only our organization but Georgia Ethics Watchdogs. So thank you. That was my first thank you.
Yeah, that's good. And I'll tell you that you really gave me courage, too, because in the beginning, when you brought that stuff up about Kemp and what he was up to in that 2016 election, and it wasn't being investigated properly, and it never was really vetted well, and then all the stuff that Binkley brought about Stacey Abrams, but Stacey Abrams stuff to me is even scarier. So it takes some courage to vote the third way. And when you, who's so immersed in the importance of elections, has the courage of your convictions, I have to say, I sat up and took notice of that. And
I really appreciate that, because, as you've already said, the lesser of two evils is still evils. And Monica, the other thing I wanted to thank you for is you were the only news media outlet in Atlanta that covered the story of Brett Kavanaugh covering up the murder of Vince Foster, the chief White House counsel for Bill Clinton. And I know I saw that on your social media post. And all of the senators on both sides of the aisle had all that evidence. If y'all, and people probably don't remember, but Vince Foster didn't have his fingerprints on the gun that was used to kill him, and it was not his gun, and his car was not even in the parking lot when his body was originally found. So, have you
ever seen what Miguel Rodriguez, who Kavanaugh basically replaced, what he wrote on his way out? Oh my gosh! Yes. What a smoking gun!
I linked that into our press release on it, and that was completely covered up by both sides. Republicans, the Democrats had the evidence. All of that, Miguel's report went to every senator, along with the witness statements of Patrick Knowlton that proved that Foster's car was not in the parking lot at the time of his death, where his body was found at Fort Marcy up in Virginia. So that was, and so we had to watch this spectacle of Democrats and Republicans pretending that they are opposite when they were really in cahoots about a murder of probably the highest-ranking official since the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
And that's how you see the Democrat-Republican thing. When they talk about the lesser of two evils, it's evil. I mean, and it's not getting us anywhere. Since we've really descended to this, it's always the lesser of two evils. This country hasn't gotten better. The welfare, warfare, super state just gets bigger and bigger. It's not working. You have to, I think, take a plunge.
Yeah, Monica, and the problem is that people think when you hit one side, for example, like Stacey, you've been very consistent in hitting both sides. You've had me on. We've talked about, we filed a criminal complaint against Brian Kemp. You've had me on the show 2 or 3 times, and more than anyone else in in Georgia. And so people only see one side. So if you happen to be doing a segment, you're attacking Stacey Abrams, they thank you for Brian Kemp, and vice versa. If you're attacking Brian Kemp for good reasons of ethical violations, they thank you for Stacey Abrams. And unfortunately, the voters can't see through this divisive politics scheme and understand that you're exposing corruptions on both sides of the aisle, and you're the only one who does that.
I appreciate that. And the thing is, this Abrams stuff that came out today, this is the first opportunity we've had to expose it, and nobody else has exposed it. But I wanted to ask you, which I have not dug into, Binkley has somewhat, what is your view on the Democrats' claim of Kemp mishandling these voter registrations, or what's your view of that issue?
Yeah, so great point. So first of all, they call it voter suppression, and I think the claim is and for the most part very legitimate. It dates back to 2000 in Florida, when Greg Palast did a story on the at that time the Secretary of State office purged what he believed to be about 69,000 voters using this exact match technique. So it actually dates all the way back to 18 years to the 2000 election. It's the same technique, but they are using it now. They used it in Kansas. Chris Kobach, as Secretary of State out there, was using it there, and now Brian Kemp was using it here. Ironically, Donald Trump jumps into the Republican primaries and endorses both of these Secretary of State candidates, which is almost unheard of for a president to involve themselves in a primary of their own party. You know, they usually campaign for someone against the other party.
Oh, yeah.
So that was kind of bizarre. But, yeah, so I think that the claim is, for the most part, legitimate. A lot of folks don't know that the counties have had a great deal of backlog of voter registrations themselves. So Fulton County, for example, had about a 20,000 voter backlog back in the 6th district race, and they couldn't get all their voters registered. And now if they do, then they go through this exact matching technique that Brian Kemp is using. There's been some claims that he's having to do this because that's what the law says, but the law doesn't say that you have to do an exact match down to the period and the T. You are supposed to validate registrations, but not to the extent that they're doing it. So we haven't heard of a lot of complaints, but we have had some. I've heard some people who were not allowed to vote on Election Day.
Oh, well, look, I have a question for you that the audience needs to know. The most important thing, I think, is how do you recommend securing your vote, protecting your vote? What's the best way to vote?
Yeah, so the best way, Monica, we always recommend voting by mail-in ballot. And I've already voted by mail-in. The way to do that, we put the instructions up on VoterGA's website, on voterga.org, on the events page. And what it'll do is if you go up there, it'll show you how you can download an application from the Secretary of State's office, and it'll show you how to get the address of your county office. You mail that ballot in. The application in. They will send you a ballot very quickly, usually within maybe a couple of days, and then you fill that out. You get to look at it for a while and think about it, like we had to think about those constitutional amendments for a long time, and then you can send it back in to the county. You can mail it in. You can take it to the county up until even including on Election Day, but you cannot take it to the precinct. You have to either mail it or take it to the county office.
Okay, and there is time to do that if people act on that right now, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You've got plenty of time to do that. So it's and all the instructions are up there. It's voterga.org/events. That's our events tab.
Okay, and then there was one more thing. We do not have time to cover all of the amendments, but it is on your website, and I did want you to tell people how to look at your analysis. And I believe there's only one of those between the referenda and the amendments. I think there's only one thing that you are now recommending a yes vote on. Isn't that correct? What is that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And for the reasons that Ted and you have discussed in the previous segment, all of the constitutional amendments, for the most part, are special interest. They're supporting some kind of a special interest that is not necessary to have a constitutional amendment. They either already have a law for it, or they can make a law for it. So there's no reason to have a constitutional amendment, because then if you change your mind down the road, it's much harder to back that out. Because it takes a 2/3 majority vote. So that's the principle why we're recommending no, and have now decided to recommend no on all 5 of those amendments, as well as one of the referenda. It's just all about special interests.
And what is the referendum that you recommend a yes vote on?
The one that probably doesn't impact so many, but we didn't think was so bad, was the multi-district amendment for homestead exemption. So in other words, if you're multi-county. So if you're a City of Atlanta resident and Atlanta spans 2 counties, those residents can't get a homestead exemption right now, as we understand the law, and that referendum would allow them to do that. So that that they would have the same thing that those in Fulton and DeKalb counties have already.
All right, so that's HB 820 is the only thing you recommend a yes vote on. And if people want to see your analysis of all the other stuff, they can go to voterga.org. Is that the best place for people to find? I got 1 minute, so tell people how to get more from you, Garland.
Yes, voterga.org. And you know what? I've got to make sure that's posted, but we'll post that on the event. I'll make sure it's posted before 6 o'clock.
On voterga.org, it's easy to click through to your Facebook page, which I believe everything's on your Facebook page, right?
Oh, that's right. It's also on Twitter. You're absolutely right. Those would be the best way. If you follow me on Twitter, Garland at voterga.org, or Garland at voterga, and then on Facebook, just voterga, all one word. You're right. All of that assistance is up there, and that we did change one of our amendments. So.
All right, awesome. Boy, did we pack a lot in there. Thank you so much, Garland. Thank you so much. And I guess I won't talk to you again until after the election. But as Ted Metz said, it's going to be a runoff anyway, so it's okay to vote Libertarian.
Great. I'm looking forward. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for being a shining light on all this corruption and really making it equal on both sides.
Right back to you, Garland. Okay, bye-bye. And I'll be back right after this to wrap it up with some parting thoughts for this election season. This is Monica Perez.
Monica Perez.
Wow, that was intense.
On News 95.5 and AM 750, WSB.
This is Junior Brown. Listen to this lyric.
Some odd years ago.
It's taking too long. Here it comes.
I left home for the first time when I was 4 years old. I'm a free-born man.
I just love that. That reminded me of an Abrams thing. Didn't she say that her mother dropped out of school when she was 8?
8 years old. And the neighbor said that she was hopeless and penniless, which is a weird way to describe an 8-year-old.
Anyway, I don't want to laugh. I don't want to pile on. I do not relish my role as like a universal spoiler, but I am glad that we're wrapping the show up on a high note with having had the Libertarian candidate for governor, Garland, who I would think that Garland, who is just so enmeshed and immersed in voter integrity and fraud issues and corruption, he'd be terrified to get the wrong person as governor, that he'd be willing to do anything to prevent the worse evil from taking office. But he has the courage not to vote the lesser of two evils. And it made me think he has more courage than I do. I mean, I always vote Libertarian, but like, this time it's like the worst. But is that, like, if you think about Trump has the biggest budget. I believe he signed the biggest budget of any president ever. And he said, don't do it again. Don't send me another budget like this because I won't sign it, which is silly. And with Obama, with lesser budgets, you had huge, like you had the Tea Party, you had people really going bananas. And with Trump, like, there's nothing. So you think you can play this game, you can game the evil versus evil and pick the lesser of two evils, but you really might not be able to play that game. So if there's going to be a runoff anyway, go into it with a clean conscience maybe. But I don't really like to tell people how to vote. Just examine your conscience. Vote what you think is the right thing to do. That's what I do, and that is the one thing that we have, If we really all examine our conscience and vote with integrity, maybe we'll have a better country. What do you think, Binkley? You got 15 seconds to speak.
I absolutely agree.
You're just saying that.
No, I agree.
Yeah, no, I know. You do. Anyway, go to iTunes or propagandareportdaily.com to find our podcast. The podcast of this show should be up in a couple of days. Thanks, everybody. And go to @Monica Perez Show to see when I'm going to be on next. Later.
See you later.